Our interactions in the group.
You show up to an event.
What are the possibilities?
You begin looking around.
You're no longer afraid
to assess the energy or feel the room.
of being judged for expressing your deeper desires.
How you should act or who you should be in order to blend in.
Belonging as opposed to fitting in.
Hey there, welcome to Truth Be Told. I'm Reverend Dan. We are the Soul Evolution Collaborative, and this is our weekly video series where we kind of kick off the topic for the week and really get into some real details in some of the nitty-gritty of life, and hopefully pose some questions to get us to think about some things a little bit differently, and of course, some inspiration and really important messages that we don't necessarily hear in other places. So this month we are talking all about relationships. Relationships, it's complicated. This is part 3, us. And so week 1, we talked all about the relationship we have with ourself, how important it is to even just try to understand ourself and the way we tick and our thought processes and where they come from and some of the experiences we've been through and how that plays out in our lives. And then how all of that combined then affects the relationships we have with everybody else. So super important, not necessarily important to be at some sort of level, but important that we are at least attempting to look at the relationship that we have with our own self. Week 2, relationships, it's complicated. Part 2, you and me, was all about the relationships that we have with others around us, the one-on-one relationships, those me and you relationships, and how we interact with those people. How can we begin to shift how we're interacting in those situations? And essentially, it comes down to observing the responsibility that we have to each other, that we're moving maybe from this responsibility for others, which looks like things like, oh, don't worry about my friend that said this thing that really embarrassed me. They're just that way. And we take responsibility for them because it makes us uncomfortable. Or responsibility for others maybe looks like repressing some of your feelings to make someone else feel more comfortable. That's a responsibility for others, but a responsibility to others can really shift our perspective. What is it that is being asked of me? How am I creating? How am I thinking in a way that is creating the experience that I have? And what impact does that have on other people around me? How do I show up to these relationships? So this week, the natural progression, then we went from self to you and I. The natural progression is to groups, the us, the groups that we are a part of. And it's a really fascinating week because I think this starts to bridge the gap into some new territory in relationships, things that by and large we tend to not be really good at because I think it's not really done well or much. We have groups that we're a part of, and if we really take an objective look at how we do groups, we don't do them that well. We're not taught to do them that well. And part of that is, I think, this old mentality that we've actually, I think, successfully debunked at this point, and it is the rugged individual, that there is this idea that I have to go it alone, I have to prove myself, I have to be able to exist completely self-reliant. And at this point, certainly, that is actually a myth. Was there ever a point in time where that was a plausible way of being? Debatable. Not why we're here. But the point is, at this point in time, it is not possible to be completely self-reliant. We are not separate from the world around us in any way. We are so directly connected in infinite ways to the whole world around us, right? The reality is, not only are we connected, but we actually need each other. We actually need the things, the relationships, the creation that we are all doing. And so we're all being called to kind of learn a new way of being, a new way of operating and living. And so we need to learn how to be in groups. So this is new territory. This is a whole new way of thinking and being. And what I think is really fascinating is there are some super basic spiritual principles, science of mind principles here. Oneness, wholeness, we talk about those all the time. How do you have oneness without looking at the entirety of the world, of life, right? It's wholeness, all of the pieces that make up the one. If we want to take this a little bit deeper, the principles at play, that law, the thing that creates a creative medium is a law of reflection. It creates that which is based on the filter of our collective consciousness. So life that shows up in front of us, in front of any life, the way it shows up is a reflection of our combined thoughts. And so if you want to know what you believe, look out in the world in front of you. What are you seeing? And that's true for all of us. I mean, it may not be any exact direct thought that any one of us is having, and yet the thoughts, the system of thinking that creates the world in front of us is that is what we as a whole believe, that collectively that is what we believe. And so there's collective consciousness tied up right into all this too. And it's pretty amazing when you look at life that way, when you recognize it, to kind of take that step back and just look at how all of it is playing out and unfolding. It's like, wow, it really happens. Like the system is so meticulous. Law really creates so meticulously. It makes sense. It's creating, when we look at what our beliefs are based on what it's creating, and then say, oh, if these are the hidden beliefs within the country or the world, yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense. That's what's being created. So huge scope of, the way that groups play out in our lives. How do we become part of groups? And I think the place to start is, it sounds simple. And so let's start with a simple idea. We're going to look at belonging compared to fitting in. And I think that is the perfect place to start when we're looking at relationships, the relationships of us, the groups that we are a part of. So sit back, relax, and let's enjoy this episode of Truth Be Told.
Tell me if this has ever happened to you. You show up to an event with a group of people. The moment you arrive, you begin looking around and your brain starts doing its thing, comparing and categorizing. You begin to assess the energy or feel of the room and then decide what you need to do, or how you should act, or who you should be in order to blend in or fit in. Please tell me I'm not the only one who has done this. So this is the challenge in the groups that we form and the groups that we're a part of. And there's no shame or blame in this reality. This is just simply how our brains work. They seek to categorize and minimize discomfort and distress at all costs. And this is especially true when we interact with others. Categorization is the brain's tool to organize nearly everything we encounter in our daily lives. Grouping information into categories simplifies our complex world and helps us react quickly and effectively to new experiences and interactions. Now, this is a blessing and a challenge. The key is to recognize when this is happening and to take a closer look. Brené Brown describes how this process happens in groups and interpersonal interactions and the gifts of imperfection when she says, fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. Now, fitting in stands in direct opposition to belonging. And so when our goal is fitting in, several things happen. And let's be honest, they don't always have a positive effect to our well-being. We minimize and downplay who we are and how we show up and how much space we take up. We create a persona that develops a barrier between others and who we are, never sure if they love or like us for who we are or for who we present ourselves to be. Our expression becomes dependent on the perceptions of others. And we don't get to experience the power and impact of vulnerability and authenticity in our lives. Now, the challenge becomes rewiring our thinking, our believing, our way of showing up. And when we feel the need to fit in, especially in a group, we can often smash our big life selves into a tiny box. And wow, can that get uncomfortable and cramped. And can have like pervasive effects on our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. And folks only see the person we want them to see and not the person we are. So then all of our interactions are impacted by limitations that we have placed on them. So how do we navigate these challenges? More on that in a few minutes. You didn't think I was going to leave you hanging, did you?
Yep, it's a feeling I know well.
Me too.
I definitely do that, or have done that. I would like to think I do it less now, but yeah, you are not the only one for sure.
Oh, good. I didn't think so. I
I do it a lot less now, but that's just because I go out a lot less.
That's a good point. Yeah,
But
I too do that a lot less.
But it's interesting. Like I, when I was just thinking about it, just and coming across that quote, like I can show up in places and automatically my brain goes, okay, yes, I'm better than that person, maybe not as good as that person. Okay, I probably need to hold back this part of me, and okay, we'll need to put that part forward, and we'll ease off on this part. All these sorts of like, just I don't know, they just seem like involuntary sort of things. But I think that the more that I'm aware of it, the more I can say I can stop myself and take a breath and decide to show up fully in those ways. But it's a challenge.
Well, and that's why I think we're going to find that this week and is there 2 more weeks left? The 2 more weeks after this, yes, that this is like the crux of where we are at in our like collective spiritual evolution.
Yeah.
Because life to this point has been based around like modern, within the last several decades or so, since I've been alive, certainly, life has been wanting to teach us, like the way life is, the way we all operate and live with each other, teaches us that fitting in is key. Like that's to remain small and hidden and safe. You fit in, and even just the idea brings up all these feelings and memories of like middle school.
Oh,
I mean, like I'm like
that's like the highlight of trying to fit in.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I can remember standing outside the door in like 6th grade, standing outside the building before the bell rings, and everyone's kind of hanging out, and there are like pods, and like these were the kids that wore hats that were very curved. These were the kids who wore hats that were straight. These were the kids who listened to rap music. These were the kids who took the bus. It was like it was crazy. Like it might as well have been like sign up lists for like who are the kids you're going to hang out with, the band kids, the soccer kids, the whatever. Right. And we were all so bad at it. You didn't, and we didn't learn how to make good relationships individually then either, because you're hanging out with people just because of you dress this way or you do this certain thing or what. And so forget about intermingling, but it was just like conformity. But the crazy thing is like, it didn't start there. I have at least one like super vivid memory of kindergarten where I remember having the thought like, oh, I can't do whatever it was I was trying to do. It's like, I can't do that here if I want to play with these kids. Like there were 2 kids playing with something else like on the floor, and I wanted to like go play with them in that thing, but I couldn't. Like, I don't know if I couldn't bring this toy over there to play. I don't know, whatever it was, but I just had remember this feeling and this thought, like I can't do this if I want to play with them. And like we learned that early.
Yeah, it's a socialized behavior too. I mean, it's like this
It's crazy.
It's not like a natural, our natural way is to fully express. We see that when we, with small kids, like this full expression that's all out, and then we become boxed by
Yeah.
the shoulds and the can't do's, and don't take up this much space, or don't do that, or if you want to be in this group, do this, and it doesn't stop with middle school. I mean, we're seeing that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even like at home, I'll make this quick. I'll let you go, Chris. Even like at home, like I can see my brother has two really young kids, and I can see how it's always easier when it's somebody else and their kids, right? I can see how towards the end of the day, the kids are like, they're wanting to just be themselves and be kids, and they're loud and all over the place. And it's like, please stop. But I mean, really, what are we teaching them? But to fit in here at home, you should be like whatever.
Right.
I don't know what the answer is to that, so don't ask me, because as like a parent, it's like, please stop being so loud. but yeah, I mean, how do you what is the new way? What is the way where we can address, like, dude, that's so loud, and at the same time, I don't want you to think I'm trying to not let you be you.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, it's all good. I don't have a whole lot to add, but it's all interesting. When you talk about, like how we see, like, starting even like before kindergarten, and then as we grow up and we kind of learn, how is it that we still end up seeing like adults that still seem to be like in that same middle school kind of mentality? We still see like bullying behavior, still see people like making fun of other grown adults for things like out of their control, and
they're in those same groups wearing the same hat, I mean, it's like, holy crap, man.
Well, and what's being called is, like I said, that the belonging, that where you can show up and be who you are. And so, like, learning how to cultivate that means really unlearning everything that we've been taught. Not everything, but as far as this idea of fitting in, and really turning that framework on its head. And I think as we begin to do that, we can see that it just up levels our relationships. It up levels our ability to interact with one another, interact with ourselves, interact in groups. It shifts everything.
Yeah. Well,
and I think that we're going to learn about possibilities coming up soon.
I think so. But first, this just in.
We are taking a quick break from your already scheduled program to bring you this special report. As you can see, it can get pretty stormy and rough out here, and now more than ever, we need a place to belong. That place is Soul Evolution Collaborative. This intentional spiritual community has a vision of personal transformation and communal evolution, an authentic way of being, living, and viewing the world. You can find space and shelter in the weekly offerings. Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, Truth Be Told. Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, The Gathering, a group experience that provides an opportunity to discuss spiritual principles and how they show up in our own lives. Sunday morning, Stripped Down Sunday at 12:30 Eastern offers a streamlined approach to your Sunday morning experience, focused on a weekly theme. And for those looking for an added adventure in intentional community, the Second Sunday Experience, every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. This is an experience that will demonstrate a new way of doing community. If you'd like to support the vision of SEC and its continued evolution, you can go to soulevolutioncollaborative.org and click on the donate button. All donations are tax deductible and serve to support this evolving ministry in its vision of personal transformation and communal evolution. And now back to your scheduled program, already in progress.
Let's take a look at some of the possibilities that arise when we begin to pay attention to our interactions in the groups, when we really make that effort of belonging as opposed to fitting in, and intentionally creating groups that really encourage that. One of the best things is that we get to stop playing small. What are the possibilities? If you are no longer afraid of being judged for expressing, your deeper desires, if you're no longer in fear of allowing other people to see that side of you that up until now you've kind of felt required to, keep it small, to not let people around you feel uncomfortable. What are the possibilities? What can you open up to and just really bring a greater enjoyment and enrichment of your life? Possibilities are endless. The inspirations that we receive, they come from this deeper place, from the one infinite mind, and they really want to express through you. But so many people have kept it down in this idea of fitting in. When we start stepping into, I'm in a group that encourages me to be my authentic self, the possibilities are really amazing, and we get to start to co-create with the people around us. It gives people permission to also do the same. And when we get to start really just rolling ideas without fear of being ousted from a particular group, the creativity, the abundance of positive impact on the world really elevates. This is a great time to be alive, because this conversation is happening in more and more spaces, and you listening to this right now are part of this creation of the world that really works for everyone. We are on this track. So more of the possibilities that arise is, when you get to take off that mask that you've kind of in the past have felt required to wear. You no longer have to live in fear of acting out of character. When you feel good about who you are, all your faults and foibles, as well as all of your gifts and talents, when you feel good and recognize that that's all part of our infinite nature, then you can go be that. You can express that in the world, and there's a freedom. You don't have to worry about stepping out of character and showing up as the way that people expect you to be. You get to just be how you are, and that again creates the permission and the space for others to do the same. And when you express authentically in a group that encourages belonging, you are encouraging others to also do the same. What are the possibilities? How can your relationship with groups really get to expand and demonstrate to others that there is a better way of being in this world? When you step up in a place of belonging, you bring with it authentic power, authentic impact on others. You have good ideas. I know you do. So this is the gift that you get to share these with the world. And when we do that, it just sends little ripples out. And we're going to talk a lot about that next week. Now, for this week, we need to find groups that, not only encourage, but kind of require people to show up authentically. Soul Evolution Collaborative, this is what we're about. Come show up on a Thursday night and just experience what it's like to be in community where you are certainly encouraged and celebrated for being your authentic self, showing up and just sharing from your own space. This is, takes intention to make groups that really encourage belonging as opposed to fitting in. So accepting yourself, the greater you're able to accept yourself, then the greater that you can create belonging out there in the world. And this is our opportunity, is to open up to belonging in our groups exactly as you are, without the old fears of the past that have kind of held us back. This is the future. When you look at people that are really out there making powerful impact in the world, they are the ones that are showing up exactly as they feel they are. And not everybody's going to like that, but they find the groups where that is encouraged and where they truly do belong.
It's interesting. I thought I would never say this, but I'm getting ready to say this. The older I get,
Uh-oh.
I know, gee whiz. No, but it's interesting, and I don't know that it has anything to do with age. I think maybe it's just the journey, and it just happens to be at this age. But I am getting less and less satisfied with not being authentic. There was that time where, I could suck it up. I'll just suck it up for this period of time and it'll be okay. And so like years of sucking it up, and then you kind of reached a boiling point of like, no, I have very low tolerance now for not being able to be myself, and it feels more and more uncomfortable. And maybe it's just because I'm paying attention more. But in the past, it was like, okay, well, I'm this way here, and I'm this way here, and I'm this way here. And it was just this kind of fragmented sort of life. And that doesn't mean that there are certain places where, we have to make adjustments based on things. But I felt like I was living this fragmented life. And I think at some point it got less and less tolerable to do that. And so now it's like authenticity is like this non-negotiable, and not that it's always easy, but I think more and more it's becoming a non-negotiable. And I don't know if I just have a different relationship with myself than I did. And maybe that's because, that's where we started with a relationship with ourselves, right? And we've kind of progressed to this sort of interaction with groups, but maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's becoming more aware of who I am. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for sure, it sounds like much clearer boundaries. Like,
yeah,
I think fitting in told us to like obliterate boundary.
Yeah.
Let's blur our boundaries are okay unless you need to blur them so you don't put yourself in this in the spotlight of other people. But it's interesting because I know we've kind of talked about this topic before and the idea of fitting in versus belonging, but it feels different now. I'm hoping it feels different to more than just us. Like it feels like a new perspective to everyone else too. But I think to put my finger on it exactly is this. Last time it felt like my perspective of belonging versus fitting in. And this time it feels like we're elevating towards what is the group perspective of belonging and fitting in? Like, how do we, what's the how, right? What's the piece no one's done this before. We've not had this experience. We are starting to here within this community, I think, but as a world, this is, I think, a newer, maybe the theory is not new, but actually doing it is new. How do we really take on the group perspective, ditch the idea of if we take the group perspective, I lose my sense of identity. And that's BS. Being part of the group actually gives us a greater sense of self-identity, gives us a place to express even greater. So we don't lose ourselves. If anything, our self expands as we become part of the group. But I'm like, all right, so what's the thing? How do we actually engage in that group identity group in a healthy way? I think there's been plenty of very unhealthy group identities, but what's that? What's the how? I think that's the part. That's what feels next for me.
Well, and even too, the next thing that I was thinking too is that going back to what we talked about, this responsibility to people. And I think it's this awareness, this authenticity, this awareness that showing up authentically is not, can be unsafe for some people. This awareness, if we look at our world and this idea of authenticity, and we talk about it and how important it is, and we should do it, blah, blah, blah. But this awareness, it's a collective awareness that it is not always safe or easy for people to do that. And so then to up-level this idea of authenticity is that, no, we are no longer going to be satisfied with a world where people have to hide who they are for whatever reason. People have to hide who they are for their own safety. People have to hide who they are for this idea of fitting in. Like, I feel like this energy is at this collective, like, no more. We want to create groups, and not just like these like exclusive groups, but like groups, places where people can practice being authentic, and places where people can practice allowing people to be authentic. But sometimes we don't get that piece, but allowing, because it takes both of those. And I think just collectively, it feels like the world is at that place of like just desperately yearning, crying out for those spaces. And I think that that's what we can do in our own little sphere, is to build those places.
Yeah.
Whether it's a spiritual community, whether it's a community in your neighborhood, or you and your neighbor. I mean, just starting somewhere. I just think now's the time. It's imperative, and we can't be satisfied with anything less than that.
It brings up a really good point, and it's kind of what I was thinking too of where to go with this. And I think maybe it's a little bit more about our, it'll come up maybe a little more next week when we talk about groups and other groups interacting. But yeah, for a lot of people, being authentic, people, that have been, historically kind of marginalized. And I mean, I'm speaking from the white, cisgendered, hetero male perspective. And so I'm very, privileged that I haven't had to hide who I am too much. So yeah, I mean, I love the idea that yes, we get in groups, we create intentional groups where we can encourage and allow more and more of that authenticity and who you are, and welcoming wholeheartedly. But it's an interesting question, like how do we, when we start getting outside of that one safe space, how do we, like for me, it's hard to, encourage somebody like, yeah, go out there and do it, be yourself. And oh crap, went into that place and you got beat up. That's not good. Like, I mean, it's a kind of a scary thing, but I certainly wholeheartedly believe it. And I know that really, I've got to develop more courage in myself for speaking out in those places. When I find myself in opposing viewpoint arenas where it's easy just to kind of sit back and fit in and not belong. Maybe, if it's a group that's overall biased in some way that I don't agree with. So it's definitely a deep learning process, but I do, wholeheartedly feel it. Like on our edge of society, we've made many statements over the last several decades of what we say is acceptable collectively. And there's still a fringe that doesn't necessarily agree with that. And I think we're starting to see a lot of that kind of come to the head, to where now it's like our time to really solidify, like, no, like we do support everybody for being who they are. And, how do we do that? Including those that, hold really strong views that I disagree with.
Yeah. Yeah. My takeaway here is that we, kind of reminds me of like, I don't know, you're at the mall or whatever, and there's like the wooden walls up around the stores that are under construction, and it's like, please pardon our appearance, work in progress.
Right.
But yeah, we are. I mean, we really are in that point of work in progress where we are simultaneously, two things are happening. And so this is my takeaway for this week. I'm going to attempt to do this more. For me individually, I'm being asked to show up more authentically as often as possible. And so I think this is true for everybody. What we're being asked, there's two things we're being asked to do. As individuals, show up more authentically as often as possible. And two, as groups, and so this is the new thing, I think, right? Individually, show up more authentically, but as a group, we are being asked to be the place where other people can feel safe to show up more authentically.
Yeah.
And that might sound really obvious, but I think that's actually like a new idea, that we adopt a group mentality of those And I don't mean group as in like this us and them, but groups as in like the people that we gather with to consciously adopt a mentality that says, oh, let's be the place where other people can show up more authentically, where everybody can show up more authentically. So to have the courage to do it as yourself, where it's safe to do it, and then let's also create more spaces where it's safe to do it. And simple plan. We'll see how it goes.
I think it's a great plan. I think it's a plan that it seems overwhelming, but it's exactly how you said it. It starts with me doing it, and then starts with the people that I interact with and the groups I interact with, the groups that we gather with, allowing people to do the same thing. And then it just ripples from there.
Yeah.
I was just looking at it, an interesting article earlier today, and it was talking about, having conversations like in these kind of what appear to be divisive times here in the United States, especially, and how to have those conversations with the people that we are in kind of strong disagreement with on certain issues. And it just basically talked about, finding the common ground, not jumping into conversations with the intent of changing somebody's mind. Because we all know that that's not going to happen in those kind of conversations, that it's something that seems to happen, when we start just to create that space, just to like allow somebody to, agree to disagree on certain aspects, but then kind of constantly reminding ourselves that of the things that we really do have in common, that it's easy to forget about when we get so deadlocked on some really challenging issues. But yeah.
And I think that's what we're creating here. I think we said it a couple of weeks ago, a playground.
Yeah.
And so this is our playground for authenticity. And we get to do it, and we get to like trip over our own feet. And then we get to do it, and then like do it more, and then allow other people to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And then that's a pretty amazing ride.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
Same. I'm in. Let's do it.
All right.